Sounds very good.
Just to my friends in the back, are there a lot of people that look like are pouring in, or may we start pretty much on time? Do you think we're here?
Okay, we're going to begin. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the meeting as provided by transmitting a copy to the Madison Eagle and the Morris County Daily Record, posting a copy on the bulletin board in the main entrance of Borough Hall, and filing a copy in the office of the clerk, all on April 15th, 2019, and on RoseNet, April 29th. Okay, so we have the Open Public Meetings Act.
Good evening, everyone. My name is...
Do we need Laurie
Lori?
to take our attendance?
Oh, yes, yes.
Attendance.
Okay, I will take a roll call, an oral roll call of those in attendance. Janet Foster.
Here.
Mary Ellen Lenahan.
Here.
Carmen Toto.
Here.
Jill Rhodes.
Here.
Chris Kellogg.
Here.
Karen Gicey.
Here.
And I believe David Luber.
Here.
And John Forte.
John's not coming.
He's absent.
Okay.
I have not heard that Mr. Solu is absent, but I don't see him here. But we do have a quorum,
Yes, we do.
so we will proceed. And if he joins us later, I hope we can catch him up. Okay? Now, our meeting is open, and present our new attorney, John Testa.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Testa. For those of you who have already been to this meeting once or twice before, I look a lot different than Mr. Laughlin. So I apologize that he's no longer here with us. I am now going to be stepping into his capacity as the Commission's attorney. Before we begin, I just want to advise you of a couple of the protocols and responsibilities of all of us for this meeting. This meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission for the Borough of Madison is a special meeting concerning an application filed by Saxon Real Estate concerning the property located at 14 Lincoln Street, Block 2702, Lot 24 in the borough. This meeting is a continuation of the prior hearings held before this commission on the application which was first conducted on March 12, 2019 and continued on April 9, 2019. The procedural rules for the orderly operation of this meeting were previously discussed by Mr. Laughlin during the prior hearing. At this time, I'd like to just remind you of those rules once more. First, again, we want to stress to you that the Commission's authority is set forth in the municipal land use law in conjunction with the borough's ordinances. Pursuant to Code 112-6A of the borough's code, a certificate of historic review is required to be issued by the Commission before any permit is issued or before work can commence for activities such as demolition, additions or new construction, or a change in exterior appearance of a building. Upon conclusion of the hearings in this matter, the Commission will make a decision on the application, which may contain advice and recommendations from the applicant in regards to the appropriateness of the proposed action, and may also include mandatory conditions in accordance with the applicable ordinances. Second, the burden is on the applicant to show that the demolition would be appropriate and that the design of the structure or any proposed new construction of the structure is appropriate and in accordance with whatever requirement that the Commission would have for conditions that would apply for adaptive reuse of portions of the building or for design elements to be incorporated. Third, the ordinance provides the criteria and requirements that apply to an application of this site. The criteria set forth at length at the Code 112-7 through 112-8, as well as 112-4B of the borough's ordinances, as well as the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic buildings. The applicant has already presented certain expert testimony and witnesses. The board has retained consultants on the issue of structural integrity and historic features and characteristics of the property that the Commission may require be filed by the applicant. For purposes of today's hearing, the applicant will again make an opening statement through counsel to provide context. From there, the applicant will continue with the presentation of his expert witnesses, after the expert testifies and concluded their testimony, there will be an opportunity for questions by the Commission members and the consultants, followed by questions by the public. I want to stress to you that Out of the courtesy and respect for each other, the applicant and the members of the commission, we ask that when it's your time to ask a question, you state your name and your address. Whenever you ask a question, please do not talk over the person who's going to be answering the question or other people. Also, allow the witness to complete that question before you can continue onward. We'd ask that your questions be limited to 3 minutes, as was the prior requirements that we'd ask from you, and that your questions not be repetitive. No comments will be made during the questioning period. However, the hope is that today, at the end of this meeting, that the public will be able to provide comments at that point in time. However, we'd like to stress to you that, again, the questioning period is not time for public comment. Rather, at the end of today's meeting, we'll have the opportunity to make those comments. During the comment portion, again, we ask that you abide by the same rules for the questioning period, which is one person speaks at a time. Give respect to everyone else. Let them finish their comments before someone else comes up. And again, it will be limited to 3 minutes per person, okay? The hearing has an absolute close tonight of 11 p.m. And testimony, if necessary, will only be continued after 10:30 if it's appropriate. We've already scheduled a follow-up hearing for May 28th at 7:30 p.m. at the same location. At that time, Save Madison Theatre's attorney, Ms. Donato, will have the opportunity to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses on behalf of Madison Theatre members, and will be able to present its own expert witnesses at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa.
Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Commission members and Commission professionals. Peter Wolfson of Dave Pitney here for the continuation of this matter, and we thank you all for your continuing interest and stamina in dealing with your review. You'll recall that we have at the prior 2 sessions provided testimony relative to the original design of the proposed building, as well as the the compromised structural nature of the existing building in connection with the demolition. So we've completed all that. With me tonight is the project architect, Jeff Gertler, who had, at the very beginning of the process, testified on the very original design. That design has undergone a number of modifications which reflect input that we received from the Commission and its professionals. Jeff tonight is going to provide his discussion on the revisions that were submitted to you early April, but were not testified to at that time, and then is going to further provide proposals for further revisions based upon Mr. Hatch's comments in his memo of the 29th of April. So that's the intended process tonight. My understanding and discussions with your attorney, Mr. Testa, included in that discussion was the Save the Theater attorney, Ms. Donato, would be that Mr. Gertler would stand for cross-examination for the public tonight, and that cross-examination would be closed except for Ms. Donato, who is away on an extended vacation tonight and is thus not here tonight. So before we get to that, I'd just like to take a couple minutes to place on the record the history of the matter from a process stance, and also to set forth, just for the record, the lengths to which the applicant has gone to accommodate this process as well as the public's interest in it. You'll recall, because many of you were here, at the request of the borough, we held a long time ago 2 informal sessions, one of which was also included the planning board, and both of which included this commission. January 15th of 2019, the site plan application was submitted to the planning board and pursuant to your ordinance was referred over to the commission. The commission promptly scheduled a first discussion for February 12, 2019, and that, as you recall, was canceled due to bad weather. We did get started, as Mr. Testa indicated, with the first session on March 12th, and testimony was presented sometime before April 8th, so nearly 3 months after original application, and 2 months after the original hearing date, we became aware that Save Madison Theatre, Inc. had retained Ms. Donato and we received some copies of some correspondence from Ms. Donato to Mr. Laughlin. At that time, she had asked for an additional hearing beyond the April 9th hearing, and Ms. Donato did not attend the April 9th hearing. There was an April 12th letter then from Ms. Donato to Mr. Laughlin indicating that she would be out of the country from the 6th through the 24th. And then there were two letters from Ms. Donato, one to the commission and one to Mr. Laughlin, asking for an extension into June to accommodate her vacation and to allow her time to present witnesses. On April 25th, we convened with Mr. Testa's good offices a conference call with Ms. Donato in which we offered a special meeting for the week of April 29th to May 3rd instead of tonight's date prior to Ms. Donato's vacation. She declined that offer, and we proposed one further meeting on May 28th, as Mr. Testa indicated earlier, in addition to the meeting tonight, at which time it's anticipated that the objector's attorney will cross-examine Mr. Gertler and put on any witnesses that they may want. So, as I indicated earlier, this plan has undergone significant revisions, and without further ado, I'm going to ask Jeff to lead you through the ones that were dated April 4th and were submitted some time ago, as well as some additional tweaks based upon Mr. Hatch's latest memorandum.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, and thank you for your time again this evening, Commissioners, and also to the Madison public. Thank you very much for attending and certainly participating in this important application. I thought maybe I would stand up and point to the things that we've changed as a reflection of the request that HPC. Did this go off all of a sudden? No, here it is. Sorry. The HPC had talked about, as well as Mr. Hatch had pointed to also. So let's start with the first image, which is of the building sort of in the third design on 312. So this was a building that the main issues that we talked about, and there'll be this image and the front facade image. But I'm sorry, Xiao Chen, let's stay with this one just for a second. So the things that we talked about was the size of the bay windows on the side. We talked about the height of the parapet. We talked about the verticality of the second and third floor, largely because of the, I'm on your way, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Of the verticality because of the recesses that the windows are back from the piers and columns of the building. And then on the front facade, you can see a little different things. On the front facade, we talked about the size of the windows, the fenestration and grills of the windows. We talked about the canopy in the front. We talked about the base along the bottom of the front entrance. We talked about the middle part of the building, that it maybe should take more reflection and response from the train station across the street from it. So we looked at all of those issues in detail. Firstly, we looked at the windows. So you could see that the original design had the larger windows, and the 3, 6, there were 15 lights in the middle bay of the building, and on the left and right sides there were 8 lights. There was a question that whether those created an industrial look, so we revisited that, and on our next go-around, which you'll see, is that this is the one that you saw on 312. So what we did to change it was that we did a few things. One is that we enlarged the width of the piers, which diminished the width of the windows. You could see the size of the brick spandrel below the windows. That's been, I'm sorry, I apologize. We increased the height of the spandrel so that now you can see the height, the amount of more brick on the face, and the window is now has been decreased considerably. We replaced the metal heads on top from metal to limestone as well. Again, a less industrial look to it. And lastly, the windows were recessed 12 inches from the face of the piers. That's been diminished to 4 inches. So that really diminishes the verticality. You don't see the shadows quite nearly as much going forward. The next thing that we talked about was the side of the building. The side of the building had the large bay windows, and there were actually 3 windows in the bay window, and there was a question about the height of the lintel, of the parapet along the top. So in our revised design, you can see the 3 windows on the left-hand side. We've now diminished them to 2, and we've changed the grills as well. Less grills in both of these windows and throughout the entire building, but you can see the changes from 8 lights to 6 lights. And then the parapet on the left side has grown about 16 inches, so therefore the windows up top were diminished by 16 inches as well, which was another comment. This just shows the bay windows in a little bit more graphic detail, where again you see the 3 windows before with the grill pattern, and now you see there are 2 windows with a more open grill pattern. And you can see more easily the parapet on the right side has grown another 16 inches, covering more of the 4th floor. Next slide. Lastly, we talked about the front entrance to the building. And what was thought was that the canopy and the storefront didn't address the train station across the street from it. So what we did, next slide, you can see this is the existing storefront design. And what we did was we took the middle canopy, which was a 12-inch piece of steel, and we actually, with all the 3 canopies in front of each of the buildings, we introduced a piece of wood inside of it. So now there's basically about 3/4 of an inch of steel, and the rest of it is wood inside of it. The middle canopy we increased from 12 inches to 18 inches, and then we recessed between this pier and this pier. We recessed the entire entrance back 2 feet and placed the doors to the retail stores from the far right-hand side and far left-hand side to the center of the building. So it better addresses the train station. As you're walking down the stairs, you see this as a centering to the entire building right now. We also changed the base, which you'll see in another slide a little bit more strongly. So I'll wait with the base in a little bit. Oh, and also, I'm sorry, and we introduced a canopy along the top also. Again, it gave a centering to the entire building with a canopy on top. Mr. Hatch sent along a memorandum based on the 429 submission. And on the 429 submission, actually, I won't necessarily read from it, but Mr. Hatch, let me know if there's anything that's missing. Feel free to jump in, okay?
Yeah, just for the record, so the memorandum is updated through additional comments through 429, and I think that the highlighted sections begin on page 12 of 15. I think those are the things you're going to refer to, right, Jeff?
That's correct. And even though there were many issues brought up, some of them were repeated because in different sections they had different meanings. But we broke it down to about 4 issues largely. If I've missed any, let me know, though, okay? The first one, actually, the first one that you did talk about was the massing of the building and the size of it compared to the existing building. But I'll show a slide later that addresses that a little bit easier. We talked about the change of the color of the window frame, as well as the change of the mullion. At this stage in the process, as you appreciate from designing buildings, it's hard to grasp the exact color, but we have a few suggestions and we can share them with you. They range from dark grays to lighter grays to bronzes, the typical Duronotic bronze. We're all trying to match with a brick, with a stone base, with a variety of things, so the color palette in total has a finely sort of crafted combination of everything. It's hard to pick one color and then go back and pick the exact color of brick. You know, right now we do have the brick, as you've seen in our renderings, which is a reddish tone brick. And we're trying to find the exact matches for the color of the mullions, color of the awning, color of the base. But what you see now, and I can share them with you now if you want to see them, Mr. Hatch. or you could show you later some actually metal finishes that we're looking at. But
Are they images or are they
well,
samples
actually
or-
metal samples themselves. You know, what
I don't know what the,
yeah.
what would you like? Would you like to see their,
You can circulate to you now, but for the comments for the commissioners, I need to see some context of it as well.
I'm sorry, the last thing you said?
The commissioners, we need to see some context of it.
Sure. Okay, should I pass them now or later? What would you like?
You can pass them out now. If
Okay, if I pass them now, there will be a little bit of maybe lack of attention to what else I'll be saying, though.
So these are swatches?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, they are swatches. I start with Mr. Hatch. Yeah, they are swatches, and they're, as you know, with designing buildings, you start with a variety of colors. You can take the paper out from between them. The idea is that if you look in downtown Madison, you see a variety of colors. You see black, you see dark gray, you see dark green, green gray, green blue, you see the rainbow of dark colors, and then you see white. White we've ruled out as a possibility for this building, but we're looking at a dark color, some off gray, black gray. It's a little bit in transition, but I think those show the direction we're heading in. And the same is true with the canopy. Right. You know, if you look on a website for canopy colors, you'll see some of the most god-awful colors available. If you look downtown in Madison, you'll see, roughly speaking, 1/3 are black, 1/3 are green, almost 1/3 are red. We're trying to find something that's a dark gray to fit in with the colors that we'll select for the window frames as well. So that's the direction we're taking on the canopy as well. So the entrance, you see the entrance has changed quite a bit. The entrance, let me grab my pointer. So you can see the entrance before, or I say the center of the building has changed quite a bit. The center of the building had just a flush window system down to the ground. And what we've changed it to is that now we have the entrance doors in the center of the building, dead center. We have an enlarged canopy across the face with wood, and we have a canvas canopy on top of that. We also have, because this part of the building is now recessed 2 feet, we have the opportunity to express the center column, doing that with wood as well in the center point. And now we're showing along the base of the building a stone base. We're showing a base not as high as the other one. The other one was like 30 inches. That was when it was glass. And I apologize, you had thought it was black painted glass. It was meant to be back painted. But that's why so we saw that pop up on your memorandum. But we're thinking that a stone at about a 16-inch high base, with the storefront coming down on top of that, which if you walk around downtown Madison, you'll see a wide variety of storefronts. You'll see some metal going right down to the glass. I noted about 6 as I was walking around yesterday. There are some that are stone, some that are brick, some that are wood, painted wood, some that are just metal panel. So there's a wide variety. We were trying to select a base for this building that both would enhance the building and also be able to provide a place to look in, to see a little life and vitality, so we didn't want to go very high. And not going down to the bottom, we provided enough base so that it feels like it's a more substantial, older building as a result of that.
So Jeff, if I might,
Yes.
the expansion of the range of possible colors, subject to comment from the commission on the mullions and the windows and the canopy is in response to comments contained in Mr. Hatch's report. And similarly, the use of stone in the base area that you just described is something that he indicated might be a favorable improvement on the plan.
Entirely, yes. Yeah. Next slide. The side of the building, there was a comment about trying to activate the side, the entrance to the movie theater, as well as the entrance to the residences on the left-hand side. So we did a few things. One is that We added wood along the side of the canopy, which we didn't have before. We added plaques on the side of the building. So the plaques would be descriptions probably about what the existing building's history was about. We added seating out on this side, which would really straddle between our property, which is only really 5 feet between us and the property line, and then the post office. So we do have to have permission to put seating out by the post office, but I think they might like to feel more engaged with the community as well. We also provided some seating along the side as well, and that would almost separate every, let's say, 10 feet, it would separate the post office property from our property at the same time. And then lastly, what I didn't point out before, if you can go back to the slide before, Shevchen. On the front, we added these planters. So at each pier, there are these planters that just stick out about 4 inches, and they would have some sort of ivy growing up on them. And they would sort of soften the whole building along the whole face, as well as, now go to the next slide, please. Along the side as well, we could create some greenery on the side of the building as well. What's nice is that now when people are walking by the side of this building, as you know now, there's just dumpsters on the side. This would be a vast improvement that it becomes really a public space that people could come and sit. They could come and relax on either this seating or the benches, be able to look inside to the retail spaces, to have some protection if they needed to by the canopy, and they'd have some plaques to read some memorabilia from as well. This is an image of the building as designed today. It shows the revised front facade with the recesses, the new canopy, larger canopy with the canvas on top, the revised window size. You could see now the size of the windows of the middle building are the same size of the windows of the 2 buildings on the right and left. They've all been reduced in width, and these have been reduced in height considerably. The windows, the bay windows have been changed. The parapet has been changed. We've activated the left-hand side. You missed the best part, John. And we changed the base of the building as well, that we spoke about, the stone base. And I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anything, but those are the largest changes. This shows it from the side. The changes, particularly the bay windows on the side, increasing the amount of brick, decreasing the size of glass, increasing the height of the parapet. And you can see on the side how now this canvas canopy on the side creates a centering to the building, even from the side view, and creates a focal point looking down to the west of the building. Next slide. There was a question about building height comparison from the existing building as is today to what we're proposing. And this was a slide we actually showed a long time ago. You may or may not remember it. But we're showing you the existing condition on this. And the existing condition is that if you were to strike a line from the train station all the way to British Pine Emporium, it would appear that the movie theater presently is just about on that diagonal line. It's really an imaginary line. I don't think anyone had thought much about it, but it is sort of telling about the heights of the buildings in this part of Madison. And if you notice, the height of the theater is 42 feet 2 inches in the front and 54 feet 2 inches measured from the back. If you look at our building, what we've done, the red represents the additional area of the building. The yellow actually represents a subtraction of the existing building in mass. Our building went from 42.2 to 44 feet, so it's a foot 10 inches only. And in the back, of course, it's the same foot 10 inches between the back comparison. If you look at this from the front view, this is the existing building, of course, and the red represents the image of the new building on top of it. If you could imagine the roof of the theater now, it's a gabled roof, so it's angled like this, the top of the roof. So what we're doing, basically, is we're taking the roof and making it horizontal. So if you can imagine the roof behind this over here, we're basically spreading it horizontally, and we're adding 1 foot 10 inches to it. So there's relatively very small mass that we're adding to the entire building. And if you look at it from the back, from Main Street, which is also an important view, I think what's really something to keep in mind is that the back of this building now is part of Main Street's view, and this is what it looks like. It also looks this way on the east side and on the west side. But the back of this building will be just what the front of the building looks like, and the apparently larger size is also very small in comparison. Someone asked a question last week from the audience, and the question was, would the new building prevent someone from seeing steeples off in the distance? The answer is no. There are no steeples from Main Street that would be in any way that would be blocking the view from that. Next slide. There was a question about, and it was talked about considerably, the apparent importance of the relationship of the train station, or I would say the exactness of the train station exit off onto Lincoln Place and where the existing movie theater is. That there's this thought that there was this perfection between walking down the stairs, and there's this axis of symmetry between the train station and the movie theater. So the reality is that if you look at this, and there was also a question that somehow it related to Hartley Dodge. So what we want to do is to make sure that there was an understanding that if you were to strike a center line between the center of the movie theater, of the train station, and look at it to the center of the movie theater, you see that don't change the slide yet, that you're not quite on center, but we'll show you a better image of this. And the relationship of the train station and Hartley Dodge doesn't exist at all. So it's only in this direction that there's a relationship, but it's off by 5 feet. So if you blow up the image on the left, this is what the photograph looks like. And fortunately, there's a railing dead center in the train station. You can follow it. So if you follow it precisely and superimpose a line on top of it, what you get is this 5 feet off symmetry. Now, I would ask any designer in this room, if you wanted to make a relationship that was so important, you would make it. You wouldn't be off by 5 feet. So my contention is that there was a site across the street from the train station, and they put the building where they thought would be best located. If they wanted to move it over 5 feet and center the building, they would have done it in 1925, but they didn't. They had a close relationship. So what we've done is that keep the slide. What this does, it actually exaggerates the asymmetry of the relationship between the two buildings. Because there's a center point, the ticket booth, is the center of the building, it would suggest to you that that is a monumentally important place of symmetry. But what we did in our design is that the middle of the building, if you remember, is one long canopy, and it's a long recess for the two retail stores. So what we've done is that we've created we've strengthened the relationship between the two buildings, but not tried to falsely identify the perfect symmetry between the two buildings. Okay. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Should we start with questions and comments on your presentation from our commission members? Well, John just got here, so Hatch. Well, should we hear your comments first? What's protocol? The commission questions first, or we should have either way?
Divert to him first.
Okay, let's have you, since much of this is sort of dialogue between you and Jeff, not directly, but in memo form. I'll let you respond first.
So, first of all, thank you for addressing my comments. I appreciate it, and I think that the design of the building has come a long way in terms of addressing some of the scale issues, some of the detail issues as well. And it was, I think, also very informative to see the diagram of the relative sizes. I'll just say, in terms of the size, that the apparent size of the existing movie theater is reduced because of the gable roof. So that does certainly impact its size. And I think the adjustments that you've made have helped to reduce the apparent size and mass of the building. And the only way to further have an impact on that is to do something dramatic with the overall design. So I think you've done a lot with what you've proposed. I think that's all I have to say. If I think of something after all your comments, I hope I'll have another opportunity, but right now that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, Jeff, on this, the corners, you've got the parapet going up in the front and on the side, and then you have that empty space at the top of that window in the corner?
Yes.
Okay, have that in all four corners? Is that?
It is in all four corners.
Okay. The other question I had was, you talked about the left side, and you talked about there some kind of like a history or something there. I couldn't see from here.
Sure.
Where you were doing that.
It's a little hard to see. It's a smaller scale than I would like, but these plaques on the side, so they really could be anything. You know, the thoughts that we had were larger, smaller, recessed, in color. Interesting, if you blew up the photograph that the HPC had on their website, you could see that what they did on their columns was where they put the movie advertisements the next week or the coming week. So, you know, one could do any number of things to recall a movie theater of that vintage, what they did to advertise the upcoming movies. So this is, I think, just a quick description that something could happen on this wall, and it become a conversation with people who are sitting and walking by.
Just to remind one of Mr. Hatch's earlier comments in terms of retaining characteristics and features of the existing building, one of them was to have an internal presentation which would have some photography and a plaque with some information on the history of the building. I think this would be a supplement to that as well, and we certainly would work with Mr. Hatch in terms of appropriate text for both presentations.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So you're still keeping the plans on the inside to use the front piece? The entryway, not the entryway.
We're going to keep the plaque.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to try to retain some aspect of the box office to the extent that it survives transportation. And there were a few other items that Mr. Hatch suggested that we consider, including chandelier.
The chandeliers and the marquee, right? Because I remember in an earlier design, you had a type of marquee inside.
So the marquee is not original and is really not salvageable, so I don't think that was anticipated.
Okay. But the salvageable pieces were the chandeliers, the, I don't know what you call it.
The plaque.
The plaque, right.
Yep.
And the ticket booth. Thank you, Janet.
Ticket booth. And then we're going to create the historical information utilizing photography inside. And now tonight we're also proposing, pursuant to some input we received, to have an additional plaque on the outside in this public area to create some additional interest.
Okay. Jeff, in the front, the doors you've put in the middle, are they 2 and 2, or how have you done them?
Well, there would be a pair of doors for each retail space on left and right sides at the center of the building.
Okay.
a pair of 3-foot doors each.
Okay, and do they go up to how high do they go?
This is probably about a 9-foot mark over here.
Okay. All right. I'll ask a question anyway. You know the doors that presently go into the theater, can you use those there?
Well, we couldn't use them for egress. They're too narrow, so they wouldn't be legal
Okay.
for egress purposes. Now, if they could be used on the inside of the movie theater itself, but
That's
not
another-
for egress, it
Yep.
might be more of a decorative thing, but,
No, okay, I understand that, but maybe on the inside
right.
where the entranceway to the movie theater would be.
Right. Just also on that score, there was a agreement that those doors were not original doors either.
Okay, that I didn't know. I thought they were original. Okay.
And I think there's a good chance that ticket booth may not be, it's probably original in shape, but because it's just inexpensive wood that's been painted, it's unlikely that it lasted for this much time without it being totally replaced. This wind-driven snow, wind-driven rain, it just decays that wood. It's not something you'd have forever there. So it's a pretty unprotected and unforgiving space there.
Right.
So there's a good chance it's been changed, and I think it's no more than just painted plywood today, actually.
If I recall correctly, in the original, one of the earlier plans, you had the room where the theater was and the little anteroom. And I thought those pieces were in there, or some version of those pieces were in there.
Yeah, I think it would be safer to think that you could recreate that exact same shape and form and paint it like it is today, but to try and remove some old wood with old nails and try and disassemble it, you'd have a better chance just building a new one.
Okay.
Really.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff, would you agree that our district, as all historic districts, let me speak into this, are three-dimensional interrelated mesh of historic sites?
Yes.
As a district is much more than its facades. So would you then agree that we must consider volume, height, and scale to do justice to the character of our district?
Yes.
So starting on page 26 of the appendix to our present preservation ordinance, we are given 5 criteria to use when reviewing new construction proposals. One of them is called size and scale. I'm quoting from the appendix. New construction should conform to the massing, proportions, volume, scale, and height of neighboring buildings. So while you have made adjustments to the proposed design as to the facade details, such as your window-wall ratios, canopies, or awnings, is it correct to conclude that you have not addressed the issues related to volume, massing, and height?
Not correct. And
How have you done that?
Well, the reason, I think you should look at the history of Madison downtown. And I'll just suggest, when I was on planning board for many years, there was a suggestion, strong suggestion, that the height of buildings in the preservation district be 60 feet high. And it was moving along in that direction. And I personally had my own architecture office build models showing what a 45-foot high building would look like to reduce that apparent suggestion of 60 feet. And it was agreed upon by multiple planners, planning board, town council, that, because we looked at other communities, not just New Jersey, but New Hampshire, Vermont, all over, and we thought that 45 feet was an appropriate building height for a downtown, because 45 feet would mean about a 15-foot first floor retail space and 3 successive floors of 10 feet of residential space. And we thought collectively that that was an appropriate height for a downtown. So that's where the 45 feet came from. It wasn't made up a long time ago. It was made up about 12 years ago or 15 years ago is when we actually made that ordinance.
2008 was when it was turned into an ordinance. It also then made the ordinance it spoke to the issue of stories and made it 3 stories.
That, I think, is a typo, honestly.
No.
I'm just telling you that when I discussed it, it was 4 stories. Because if you think about a 3-story building at 45 feet, and you have a normal 15-foot retail space on the ground floor, and you're going to say to someone, you'll have 2 15-foot high ceilinged residential floors, it's preposterous. So I'm suggesting to you, I know it sounds silly, it's a typo, but good planning does not suggest 15-foot residential floors. 10-foot is appropriate, right? 1-foot construction, 9-foot floor-to-ceiling heights.
Well, there's a lot of ways to organize the building section, but to call that a typo seems to be out of keeping with your own experts. I mean, the engineering and site drawings show that you require a variance for the number of stories.
Right. So I'll bring to your attention the new building on Greenwood Avenue, alongside the IOSA's building, which is a 3-story residential brick building whose height is 45 feet along the street.
Yeah.
It's 3 stories, and it looks awkwardly proportioned because you have even higher than a 15-foot high ground floor space and probably 13 or 14-foot high residential spaces and very high parapets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways to design buildings, as you know. That building, for some reason, the first floor is elevated a little higher than you might have expected, which tends to elevate everything.
I know why they did that. If you want me to share.
No, I don't think we need to know that. I'm sure there's a good reason for it.
No.
So
That's besides the point.
The master plan specifically says that it's 3 stories and 45 feet. I mean, it's right in our master plan. I don't think we need to debate that. And your expert has put it down as a needed variance for the 4th floor. So it's a given.
So, Chris, I have a question for you then. If the building were 45 feet, but 3 stories, would it change your reaction?
Well, what I'm trying to get
And by
at,
the way, it could be 45 feet right along Lincoln Place.
No, it
so
can't
we
be.
held it back to 35 feet.
It can't be 45 feet because of the grade plane averaging you need to do on a sloped site.
Okay. Shall we talk about grade plane average now?
If you wish.
Sure, I'd love to. So let's take a look at Lincoln Place, okay? Look at Lincoln Place along Waverly Place at the corner. At the corner, it's flat, right? So you turn the corner, perfectly flat. Do we know what the average grade plane is? Can I explain it then? It says a building, let's say it's 45 feet, would start from an average grade plane, if this is a grade plane. But if the plane went down, or if the plane went up behind the building, it would change the height that you could build the building. So if it went up roughly 10 feet to the back, you'd lose about 5 feet of the building. Or I'm sorry, you'd gain 5 feet of the building. If it went down 10 feet, you'd lose 5 feet in the building. So that it makes perfect sense because, again, I was one of the authors of that on the planning board. It made perfect sense for residential houses, so no house looked awkwardly bigger or smaller than the house next to it. And it was also about putting in driveways underneath houses and pumping up the apparent height of a house. If you look at Waverly Place, it's flat as you turn from Lincoln Place around Waverly. If you go to our property, it goes down about 10 feet. So if you were to comply with the average grade plane along Lincoln Place, and I think every urban planner would suggest not to do this, is that every property would have a different height. It would keep on going down and down and down until you got to Prospect, because it goes down in the back and level over on Waverly Place. And if you look across the street by the train station, if you were to develop the buildings across the street, if there were public space, those properties would be higher because the plane goes up. You'd be benefiting by 5 feet. So what you would have virtually every single building on Lincoln Place a different height because of the property elevation behind it. The idea of what we did with average grade planes had nothing to do with Lincoln Place or downtown, had everything to do with single-family houses. And the idea of urban planning and 45 feet was that every building should be about 45 feet, and you would have sort of a march of buildings of all the same height. They could be lower, but they can't be higher. But it wasn't a forced gradation down on one side of the block and a gradation up on the other side. That would not be the intention of urban planning. So,
Well, there's no mention of that intention in our ordinance. So, you know, and your expert, the Bowman consultant that you hired to do your site planning, has clearly done grade averaging. They've indicated that your building is 49.33 feet high.
If I might, you know, we applied for a site plan, and we look at the ordinance requirements, and we applied for a variance.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, you have not addressed the concerns that have been put forth by either Mr. Hatch or the commission in previous meetings regarding the massing of the building.
Jeff, your testimony earlier tonight is that it's a de minimis increase both in terms of height and mass over the existing building, correct?
correct.
And your earlier testimony through a number of slides doing a comparison along Lincoln Place is that it is consistent with the development there, right?
Correct.
Nevertheless, the diagram you showed of the section through the building is somewhat deceiving because you take the long cut through the street and through the old theater at its ridge line. And Mr. Hatch just pointed out a moment ago, the gable roof substantially reduces the volume of the theater. So your building, and I asked you to check the volume for me, but your building appears to me to be about 30% larger than the theater building.
Our design was not trying to replicate the movie theater.
Of course not.
So the fact that it's larger didn't suggest to us as designers or developers we're doing something wrong. In fact, what we do as designers and developers is we look at what the code is in the municipality that we're working in. And we look at the code and we saw it was 45 feet. So if you actually use the average grade plane precisely, the building right on Lincoln Place could be 40 feet. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And how high is, can you go back, Xiao-Chen? So we could do 40 feet legally. And our building, we're not showing it here, but our building at this point is about 10 feet down, so it's about 34 feet. So we lowered the legal amount by 6 feet. Frankly, I have no intention of making it higher than it needs to be. I'm just trying, in our design, we're trying to create a building that contextually fits in with downtown Madison, that conforms to the building across the street to it, that's down the street from it. We're not trying to make it conform to the consignment one-story building next to it, or basically the 1.5-story post office to the left of it. That's not a relationship that we think is worthwhile.
Well, okay, my wider point is that the diagram you show here makes it look like there's a small little volume at the front of the building and a tiny little blip at the back, when in fact, if you took the section the other way through the building, we'd see a substantial increase in volume.
But I showed a drawing of it head-on and showed the apparent additional size on the right and left sides. I wasn't hiding that. That was...
No, that's the section you showed through the... this one.
I showed that one.
Yeah.
So I wasn't hiding the additional... That was probably the easiest way to show this. And because we were looking at the existing building, we thought everyone would grasp that the quickest.
Well, this diagram also, unfortunately, is not showing the true volume of your structure in as much as the second and third floors of your building are cantilevered 42 inches beyond the line of the building to each side.
No,
and then at the top,
only on one side.
Well, your drawing showed on both sides, but perhaps I misread that.
I think it's only one, but you should check the drawing.
So at this point, respectfully, I understand Mr. Kellogg's passion for the various points that he's made throughout this hearing, but I don't know that the continuing argument over the exhibits is useful. The exhibits speak for themselves, and they're in the record.
It wasn't an argument, it was a question that he's trying to ask him to confirm whether or not there's a difference in one side as opposed to the other side based on your diagram. So can you confirm that?
Yes, only on the east side is there a cantilever. On the west side, it's straight.
Jeff, do you have a picture of that?
Well, the actual rendering on the front would show it. Maybe the other, it's actually hard to, well, you could see this is the cantilever, this little piece over here that comes out 42 inches. And on this side, it's flush. It's straight. It recesses on the third. So on the fourth floor, it recesses, again, trying to reduce the apparent bulk of the building. We recess the fourth floor in the front, in the back, on the left side, and on the right side.
It does show, extension on each side. But we don't have to get into the details of that. I could be well mistaken on that. The building is not that simple to immediately grasp. But my bigger point is that, as John Hatch has pointed out, the volume of the building is substantial, and it doesn't conform or fit well within this part of our historic district. And since we have in our appendix, we are given the criteria of volume to consider. So let's just talk about the height for a minute.
But let's go. You want to go back to bulk for a moment?
Okay, let's do bulk.
So the building can, by ordinance, be 40 feet at the street, but it's 6 feet lower than that. It could extend 5 feet more to the left, and it could extend 5 or more feet to the right. It could be a bigger building. We don't need it to be a bigger building. We're not trying to make it bigger. We think this fits comfortably on the site. The movie theater was not a small building. In fact, if you go back to the very opening slide, Xiao Chen, this is interesting. This is, of course, ghosted, but this is the movie theater. Do you see another building in the area this big? I mean, I don't want the people in the audience to think we had a very small movie theater and now we're putting in a very large building in its place. You had the largest building in downtown already there. We're basically replacing it with about the same size building. It's not any wider, it's just a little bit higher on the sides, filling in the gable roofs.
Well, Jeff, the sides of the building, as Mr. Hatch has pointed out, are one of the reasons. The way he described the building in his original report was the sides, and particularly the rear of the building, feel quite massive because the site drops so dramatically, exposing more of the exterior walls. That's the existing building. The top of the parapet walls, as they run down the site, is about 36 feet. The top of your parapets are 56 feet. So you've added 20 feet.
No, I'm sorry, the top of the, you mean, you're talking about the lowest part of the side of the building?
Correct, at the back, as you drop down the site.
So could you go to the other slide, the back of the building? I'm sorry, the one of the, showing the front and back with the dashed lines. Are you speaking about this elevation?
Yeah, so,
okay.
So you have your heights already shown on your diagram, at least you did originally. So the top of the parapet at the left corner is about 36, somewhere in that range, 34, 36. And yours is 57, all the way to the top. So your bulk, you've added a considerable amount of bulk to the original walls. So
we're not denying we're adding more bulk to the building. That's not, I think, a question. And I think I've tried to show that in a multitude of ways. So the answer is yes, we're adding more bulk to the building. That's correct.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask some more questions, but let's see if someone else has a question or two.
Thank you. I know we have a queue in line here. Karen, would you like to?
Yes, I just had a question, Jeff, about the design of the first floor. I was reading in the Tomasetti report under the conclusion, that's section 5, pages 6 and 7, it says, in a historic commercial district, it is crucial to support buildings and enterprises that will thrive and maintain desirable life and activity in a time when many historic commercial districts have vacant and struggling businesses. Now, my question is two parts. One, you have 2 retail spaces there now, and in this very report here, he's saying that that's somewhat difficult in a small town to fill. So I wondered if there was any consideration given to, or could there be, to making the whole first floor a movie theater. In other words, no retail there. You come in and there either is one large movie theater or two small ones. You can use the things that are historic in there if you were to choose to do that, and that might be appropriate. But I didn't know if that was ever considered. That's the A part of the question. The B part is, if you were to do that, could you then use, how the land slopes, and in the back part there, you now have 24 parking spots underneath the building. Would it be possible then to have the theater slope down and put 24 spots in the back, it's not a lot of cars, for 24 cars, and have like solar panels back there or something, make the building a little green? I don't know if that can be considered at all, but I just thought I would ask if that was even considered or thought about. Thank you.
Well, the answer, and I'm going to answer for Saxon for a moment. I've done a lot of building renovations. I've actually worked for our favorite Bowtie movie theater for a major project for them between 44th and 45th Streets at Times Square for hundreds of thousands of square feet for them. Right? So like any retailer or any owner, if a retailer comes along and wants to take the space, what you do is you build out a white box, it's called, and you advertise, just as Saxon has been advertising. And if a movie theater came along, they would be an eligible contender. But you don't necessarily know that you're going to have a coffee shop, a movie theater, a clothing store, any number of things. So we're planning for a white box, and whoever wants to take it could basically take it. No one's approached Saxon to take the space, any of the spaces for movie theaters.
Okay, but the theater you have designed in the back is smaller, so I could see why someone might say that might not be profitable. That's just not a comment. That's a comment. I shouldn't have made that, but I just meant in terms of your rethinking them. What about, so if you were to do that, let's say someone wanted to take the space for a movie theater, could it be redesigned and do what I said, and you could have a sloping theater then? Because I think that's one of the concerns that people have had.
Sure. We've probably all been to Robert Cinema over in Chatham, Hickory Square.
Many times, sure.
You've been there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Number of
times.
times.
So have we, and we go there quite frequently, actually.
Good.
They have really great movies there.
Yes.
And so the size of screen that we could fit in our theater would be slightly larger than the screen that they have at Hickory Square. So we're showing 91 seats because we're showing comfortable seats. Hickory Square, or Robert Cinema, has probably 100 and something there, but they're pretty small seats. So and that's a very deep theater,
right.
And that's a small screen for a deep theater. So our theater is probably 2/3 as deep with more comfortable seating. So the answer is we could make it viable.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
I would like to back up a little bit and first of all say how much I appreciate, and I think the Commission appreciates, your listening so well to our comments. And I'm afraid I made the snarky comment about looking industrial, and you have moved the building well beyond that. It is clearly contemporary, but I think picks up a lot of cues that are appropriate for insertion in a historic district. So I just thank you for listening and acting on that. If the building met our zoning, if this increase in height is so de minimis, why is it not 18 inches smaller to actually meet the zoning requirement, in which case we wouldn't necessarily have this discussion?
Well, you're saying 18 inches, but that just matches the existing movie theater, correct? When you say
whatever your height differential that the 4 feet that you need the variance for, the overall height variance of the new building, I understand needs a variance for height because you're exceeding the 45 feet that is regulated for our town. I'm not talking about number of stories, that's fine, but is it possible to take a couple of inches out of every floor and get to conformity in height?
No.
Okay.
But
Can I
not that
ask?
close either, and I'll tell you why.
Okay,
Because the
why?
building would have to be approximately 40 feet high. If you're losing about 5 feet because the average grade plane, I'm just rounding off now, 40 feet, and you use the average residential height for a building now, which is 10 feet floor to floor, losing 1 foot for floor construction, 9 foot for floor to ceiling height. So you have 3 floors at 30 feet. It leaves 10 feet for a retail entity. There isn't no retailer who wants it wouldn't be a 10-foot ceiling unless the foot of construction is 9, and then everything else you put in there, ducts and pipes, et cetera, et cetera. If they're left with a 7 to 8 foot ceiling, could you think of any retailers that would say, I want my business in Madison? So you would basically render the building not viable for that purpose. I don't think we want to do that. We want to activate Lincoln Place.
So and does your project work if it were only 3 stories instead of 4?
Yeah, I can't speak for the numbers.
Okay.
But what troubles me, honestly, is that we sit on our boards for a very long time. We come up with rules and regulations and ordinances, and we're saying 45 feet, and now we're coming before you, and you're saying, let's make it 35 feet. We were just kidding.
I didn't say that. I'm asking a question.
Understand, but effectively, it's saying, let's just reduce a floor, reduce 10 more feet, let's just do the same project, let's ignore what we spent time developing. And my contention about the 45 feet was that we spent a great deal of time understanding what 45 feet felt like. We as a collective group thought that was fine. And what we're saying tonight, potentially, is it's not fine. Even though it's in our ordinance, 45 feet, if this building didn't have a slope going down, let's look at it a different way. So we're being penalized for a fantastic geometry. I'll tell you why. If you were to build the building in downtown Madison today, you would have to provide parking for the building, correct? So where would you put all those parking spots? You'd have to put them, you couldn't dig a driveway all the way down roughly 10 feet and turn around and park for 20 spots. Not enough space, definitely. So you'd have to put on the ground floor. So let's put 20 or 24 spots on the ground floor. Well, that happens to be the parking garage. So therefore, we're saying, let's look at what, again, IOSA did on, is that Central Avenue? He's got a 4-story building there. And what's the ground floor? Parking. So why is there parking on the ground floor of that building? Because of that question. Can we put parking anywhere else? And the answer is yes. Let's put it underground. And in this particular site, we have such an amazing, blessed geometry and topography that we can go down on the right-hand side, curve around, and be underneath the building, and no one sees a car. And our benefit for that, our reward, is basically being asked, can you take off a floor off the top? Because we have the benefit of that topography. When I was on the planning board for years, whenever there was an opportunity to put parking deftly underneath the building, we all said, that was great, cheers, that was fantastic. Now there's seemingly not the recognition of the benefit of not seeing one car. They're all underground.
I'm aware that parking is not really the purview of the HPC. We know that's part of the design,
right.
But I'm really trying to, in my mind, settle the issue of, I guess I would best describe it as big shoulders. It's the parapet height is pretty close to what you're suggesting. It's the filling out of what is currently void to solid, and trying to imagine how that fills up and integrates or not into our district. So I appreciate your answering my questions about what's possible and not possible. I'm certainly not making a recommendation one way or the other. I would just be sensitive that the first floor is, or the front being set back is great, is stepped down, that's great. My visual concern, based on our criterion for the HPC, is that bulk, particularly at the top, and particularly how that impacts a view from Main Street. As you say, we have a pretty unlovely view of a backside of a building from Main Street right now. If that is wider and fuller, does that help, hinder, or become a non-entity in the viewing of our district? And I'm still asking questions. Other people are asking questions, still trying to get a handle on that. So thank you for answering the questions. I'm sorry you were upset by that.
Not upset
Are
by
there other questions from our board about the project?
No, Jeff, I had can you put a slide up that shows the two buildings, the current building and the one before it?
You mean with the dash lines?
Yeah. No, just with the two pictures, the fronts of the buildings. I don't know if you have that.
With your revisions?
Oh, with our revisions, the one before and after.
The old version and the new version?
Yeah.
In other words?
And it was very helpful the way you did the slides showing the old and new pieces. Like that. That was very good.
That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
There was no one slide that had the existing, sort of the older building and the newer building.
So run through.
Okay, would you like to see that again, Mary Ellen?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So why don't you start from the very beginning, if you don't mind, Shachan? That would be helpful. So we talked about where the bay windows,
Yes.
the parapet. We talked about the apparent sort of verticality of these piers in between the windows.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the front elevation, we talked about the diminishing the size of these windows, widening of the piers, the brick piers themselves. We talked about the parapet, the bay windows. We talked about making this cornice along, this piece along the front with wood in it and enlarging this piece, adding a stone base along the bottom, taking the doors from the side and moving them to the center. We talked about activating the left-hand side for more of a plaza, and an awning that we added on top. And so the next slide, I think. So this sort of goes through each one. If you want me to go through each one again? Or?
No.
The
Please,
final version.
and that's fine. Another comparison would be, that's the side, right?
That was, go back again, I'm sorry, Shasha. Right, that was the original side, and that's the new side.
Okay.
I guess keep
Okay.
going until I think, go back one. I think that's really one of the largest differences
Yes.
between the two designs, is that I think one of the important things as any part of whether it be Main Street or Waverly or Lincoln Place is that you want people to walk down the street and feel that there's activity, they want to see into a store, there's lights on, they want to go there, and hopefully the store owner makes a sale that day. So we think that this look right now, particularly with the recessed doors in the center of the building, with adding some wood and the canopy and planting, is about as inviting as really I've seen in most downtowns or any building, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Yes, so echoing Janet's concerns about what we're trying to envision in our minds about how this is going to look and if it's going to be sized appropriately, and recognizing that the back of this building is totally open and visible from Main Street. Do you have any plans that actually show this from the Main Street so we can actually get a sense of the scaling of the back of the building, considering that is the very substantial element we're dealing with?
What I think I could show you, if we go to the this front of the building, is basically virtually the same, except for this parapet
Yeah,
at the back.
so is the
And when
fourth
we-
story similarly set back, or is it flush with the back wall?
It's set back also, so there's actually a terrace in the back, terraces on the sides. And then also, talk about the shoulders before addressing that, was that's why these bay windows on the side of the building, they are further glass set back to diminish the size of the shoulders as well, as we're diminishing the height, the setbacks, and the sides themselves with the bay windows. So we've taken a number of sort of architectural devices to diminish the size of the building. Most importantly, we didn't use the entire site either. By code, you could, but there was we didn't do that. So we've already pulled the building in roughly 10 feet from where it could be. It could be 10 feet wider. I'm not suggesting, don't take this as a threat. It's not like that. It's just that it could be 10 feet wider.
No, I'm just
So
trying
it's
to
just-
understand.
It is actually narrower already.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
because you actually have applied for a variance with the one saying it's going to have 100% of the impervious lot coverage ratio. So I'm just trying to see, is that you would take away the sidewalks if you could have made it bigger? I don't quite see how you could have made it bigger.
Yeah, well, so this 5-foot walk on the left-hand side, if the building occupied that 5 feet, then we would have an access to the residential right here in the corner. We thought it was a more interesting way to approach it by going to the back and actually having an activated side entrance. So we thought that was a positive thing. And on the right-hand side, we try to create as wide a driveway as possible for two-way traffic. Right now, there's not two-way traffic. There's only one way. We've created two-way traffic there. So we try to take those directions.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Jeff, I do have a few more questions. The issue of the structure, let's just talk about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
As you well know, as an architect in New York, you can do much lower floor-to-floor.
And New Jersey.
And New Jersey, apparently. You can do a much lower floor-to-floor height when you pour concrete as opposed to steel. What system have you anticipated for this new building?
You could go to lower floor heights with many systems, right? We're not going to do a concrete building above the first floor. We'd probably just build a concrete podium and do probably just metal gauge on top of that, because, or even wood. It's really that's what you'd build with. The residences above don't need big spans. Only the ground floor needs a large span.
So 15 first floor, 10, 10, and 10 adds up to 45 feet. So, I mean, we have the 40-foot height limit, but you've been telling us that 45 feet isn't good enough and need to go to 49.
No, what we're saying is that we're really trying to build a 45-foot building after the setback beyond the third floor.
Right.
And that's where it would reach the full height, because at the top of the third floor, which is how we view Lincoln Place, as presently there's only... I tell you what's interesting is that we talked last time about Lincoln Place and the beauty of Lincoln Place, about how all the buildings lay out and how meaningful it is. So if I could introduce something for you to take a look at. So I took photographs of Lincoln Place. I said, well, let's just make a collage out of it, the way it really is. And I promise to look at
Demonstrative at this point in time, are you going to be entering this as a...
I'd love to, yeah.
So,
Foundation.
yes, thanks. Okay. So, Jeff, you've indicated that you took the pictures that are connected here and compose a panoramic view of Lincoln, correct?
Correct.
And you took these when, approximately?
2 weeks ago.
Okay. So, I don't know where we are with the exhibit, so why don't we mark this A1, today's date, okay, for the record?
So the reason why I did this was because, listen, yes, sure.
Did you do any editing? I noticed this is a collage of what was photographed. Did you actually do some editing to what the photographs depict? as in the structure?
What was done was that basically I paced about 10 steps about 10 steps in between taking a shot, and then 10 steps taking a shot. And then through the mastery of Xiao Chen, he took all those photos, correctly sized, and spliced them together. So if that's what you call editing, yes, because obviously I couldn't take one panorama shot. It had to be put together. Yeah. And I think what you see from that is that Lincoln Place is not particularly pretty. It doesn't tell any story of any consequence. So when we talk about what is this going to do to Lincoln Place, my answer is it's going to enhance it a great deal. And I would welcome a new vibrant building on the street that might have both some vibrant retail and some residential above it, because right now Lincoln Place is a pretty tired-looking street.
So, Jeff, you have indicated that.
1 minute.
Yep. So, Jeff, you've indicated that the benefit you gain by having parking below the building, which is an unusual condition in Madison, shouldn't then penalize you for adding a fourth floor. But in fact, you're getting 3 floors, where in many cases for a project of this scale and scope, you would only be able to do 2 on top of parking. The proposal on 98 Main that's currently going through the zoning process in town is looking for 2 stories above parking behind the bank. So I don't think you're being penalized by folks asking about the 4th floor as a possible elimination, because you've gained something by having the sloping site. You and your owner have specifically gained a substantial benefit, because now you can have 3 full floors with parking. So now you've said, I got to have a 4th floor as well. So the question I would have is, can you not do the 4th floor and save yourself 2 of the most difficult variances to get would be the height and the stories?
Right. Well, let's be clear about 2 things, I think. One is that we're talking about a 45-foot tall building, right? It's not taller than that because you measure it from the first habitable floor. It's not from the cellar floor. I think we know that. So
Right.
It's 45 feet from Lincoln Place, and we have 4 floors, one 15 feet and the other 3 are 10 feet, and that comes out to a 45 feet building. The average grade plane would knock that down approximately 5 feet.
Correct.
40 feet. So at 40 feet, you have this in-between building in terms of height, which is why in the ordinance we made it 45, allowing a 4-story building. That's precisely why it was done. We didn't make it 40 because it doesn't tabulate to a 3 or 4-story building. It doesn't make sense. We made it 45 specifically because it felt right as a massing study, and it felt right as a 4-story building.
But now a flat site, you could, I'm sorry, go ahead and finish.
So that was the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing is that you say we're benefiting, and the answer is yes, but there's somebody else benefiting, and that is Madison. And why is Madison benefiting? You don't see a car on the street or in a parking lot the way you see in virtually every other development in Madison, and you gain from that a vitality on the street which is needed in downtown Madison and really needed on Lincoln Place.
So, but if it was a flat site, you would be able to build your 45 feet and eke in 4 stories.
Well, not eke in,
The ordinance,
it'd be the perfect 45.
Yeah, it'd be perfect, yeah. So the ordinance was correct in that sense. The ordinance did not consider the specific site. But not only that, the ordinance does say 3 stories as well. It's not a typo.
So let me ask you a question. If you're on Lincoln Place, anybody, and it's very hard to walk on the south side of Lincoln Place, but you can walk on the north side. Would anybody recognizing, so I want to be practical about this, anybody walking on the sidewalk on the north side of Lincoln Place, which is what 99% of the people walk, because that's where the sidewalk is, who recognizes that there is an elevation drop or rise behind those buildings? You can't see it. So because you can't see through buildings, obviously. So the point is, if you can't see it, the most important thing is what is the urban context of Lincoln Place. And I submit to you, it's as if it's a flat street, and whether it goes up or down in the back, let it be just like Main Street, which everyone perceives to be as flat. And that's why I say if you look across the street, if you had the advantage of a hill on the other side, you would have buildings 50 feet high. No one wants 50 feet.
No, that's why we have 45-foot limit.
That's why we thought perceptually that was the right height.
So, I mean, we can debate the planning issues back and forth. There's a lot going there. You haven't done a rendering from Main Street down by the diner looking up at your new building. And I think one of the members asked if that was possible, because that would be very interesting to see. But you did add another rendering that I'd like to ask you about right now, and that is the rendering from Waverly Place looking down. So if you could pull that one up to the screen, I want to look at that in a second. From Waverly Place looking towards the new design.
Did you bring that internal one?
It was included in the last submission. That rendering was on the third page of the last submission.
I think it's the one that you did, Xiaochen. Internal, it wasn't the professional renderers. Do you have that on there?
Chris, do you have it there? Okay.
Right, that's the one we did internally. Right.
Yeah, we asked for this at the last meeting. Thank you for doing it. So this drawing, which all of us can see, and I guess the rest of you cannot, this drawing is in our packet on the third page. So, two comments on this one. It's a little difficult for me to feel like this is giving a full picture, because you can see, if you understand perspective, that we're not on the ground, as most of our renderings are done at street level, and you did the view from the other side, looking this way, you're at ground level. This is probably 10 feet up in the air.
Just holding the camera like this.
Yeah, it's considerably above. So
is that from Google, I think? I think it's from Google, that picture.
This has the effect of reducing the overall volume of the building because we're higher.
It's negligible.
It's not really negligible, but I would suggest I'd like to see this rendering redone from Waverly Place.
Well, this is what the study we had. This is the study we had done a while ago, and that really shows the relationship of 3 Lincoln Place in relation to 14 Lincoln Place, and it really shows the relationship between the height of this building and the height of the parapet of our building, and how again, if you're walking on Lincoln Place, even though our rendering it's really further away, just to show more of the face of the building, but the fact of the matter is you can only see this from a view from here. If you're walking on Lincoln Place itself, you don't see the 4th floor. I mean, that's the reality of perspective.
Well, you see it clearly in the image you gave us, and you see it in that one, and you would see it further down from Waverly Place. So my point is still about the bulk of the building. It's substantially bigger than the theater, which is a smaller 2-story box that goes back over 30 feet.
We should show you what the theater looks like within that picture.
Yeah,
I think
if you were able to do that, that would be helpful.
Okay.
It would be nice, too, to see this down at eye level and further back.
Excuse me, just for context in the record, because we're referring to stuff without really being specific. Your last references, Jeff, were to a slide which is part of an exhibit that's already in the record, and that's slide number 9, and it's entitled Contextual Comparison 14 Lincoln Place. And then, Mr. Kellogg, I think you're referring to the submission dated 4/4/19, and I think I have...
Or 5/19, yeah. Yes, correct, that's the one.
And it is a composite picture called Elevations, and it's issue for HPC revised.
Right. So, I mean, architects, as I well know, you draw renderings to best show our building. In this case, I think that raising of the perspective view to considerably higher than eye view has given the building a lower profile. And then I see that the cupola for the post office conveniently hides the penthouse on the new building. So it's something, it's right behind it.
Yes.
Yeah, which is why I think we positioned the camera in that particular location. So all I'm saying is I would like this rendering to be redone a little farther down the street so we truly see the projection of the new building out into Waverly Place. The other rendering I'd like to talk to you about would be the one here, which I believe you do have, the main view you've been showing us all along. So if you could pull that up for a moment. Yes, that's from today's presentation. That's in our packets. No, it's not the one. It's the one that shows the station to the left with the
that
woman in the...
cropped a little bit, but it would be better to show the station because the station is higher. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
so
the station is actually higher. We even show it in this.
Yeah, so let's just take a look at that view.
Well, I don't think we have that one.
There it
we
is.
have this one? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
So in that view, we also see some shifting of elements that I'm just curious for you to speak to. The building, the flooring store at the end of the street.
Again, I'm sorry, Chris.
The flooring store at the end of the street there, the three-story existing building.
This one?
Yes.
And
the
yours?
photographs that I've taken of that from the exact position where this photograph was taken, the building is considerably lower. So, and we've also lost the mansard roof of the other building across Waverly Place. For some reason, that just disappeared, which is right there to be seen by anybody standing in this position. So it makes it look to me like that building at the corner is taller than it actually is.
So this was from a photograph, and we superimposed our building into the photograph.
Okay,
So I
well,
believe
something
it's perfectly
shifted
accurate.
because if I take, my photograph doesn't have that building that tall.
Which building?
The three-story existing building at the end of Lincoln Place. So
You could check your photographs. I'm
I
sure
would
it's that tall.
suggest
we'd
that
like to check that.
Okay.
unless either of you are using actual rectified photography, that it's way too squishy to compare your photo from his photo.
Yeah.
It depends on your camera.
Well,
you
no,
believe
there's
you're at
a
the
height
same
issue there.
angle, but
You can stand there with your eye and see that the building is too high.
I would just,
So I'm just asking the question. I'd like to see it
Okay.
checked.
It could be checked. So we also check it with Google Earth that does a few inches. They're very accurate.
Okay, lastly, I just wanted to check in on color. Your palette that you passed around is a very monotonal color, and in general, the Secretary of the Interior and many other historic preservation ordinances do not recommend monotonal color. So we have mid to late 19th century, a certain palette that's kind of in particular or throughout the country, and then as you come into the 20th century, it gets a little lighter. But generally, there's a blend of color from frame to sash or door, cornices. I think in keeping with the downtown character color-wise, your building is too monotonal, and I would ask you if that was something you would consider adding a little color to your design.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Any other questions from the commission? I would suggest a quick recess, quick break to get our heads together and whatever else. And when we come back, I believe we will be able to have questions from the public for Mr. Gertler and Mr. Hatch. So let's call it 5 minutes, 7 minutes, if we have a line in the loo. See you soon. Okay, everybody present and accounted for again. I think I cut off questions too soon, or I missed an opportunity for Mr. Hatch to have any further comments on this report. I'm so sorry, John. You're just like way out there in left field for me, and
I don't. You know, I think the discussion was pretty thorough. I don't have any other comments. So.
Are there any commission members who want to ask a question specifically of John Hatch?
Yes. I just wanted to refer to your report, John. On page 5 of the report you submitted on April 29th, you state that in summary of issues regarding demolition, that the Historic Preservation Commission is charged with, quote unquote, achieving preservation of historic resources in the designated historic district and promoting the use of the historic district and fostering private reinvestment in the historic district and balancing the purpose of historic preservation with current needs.
Yeah.
And that comes from our ordinance, correct?
Right. I put that in there because that was language in Madison's ordinance. Yep.
And in your summary, then you go through in section 1 and in section 2, where you refer to the fact that the building requires, if it was to be in number 2, for example, its current and potential use for the uses permitted by zoning, and you refer in your final statement in that paragraph. In fact, the building requires significant reconfiguration to make it economically viable, at least for a number of decades, as several smaller movie theaters. Apparently, its closure several years ago reflects additional economic constraints.
Yeah, there's a bit of conjecture in that, but the original configuration, the building was as a single large movie theater. I'm forgetting when, but it was divided into a number of smaller ones when that was no longer a viable economic model, and then obviously it ultimately closed completely.
So I guess what I wanted to make sure that we on the commission are aware that that's part of our charge here, is to make sure when the ordinance was first written in Madison, it made sure that at least one member of a Class C member had to be somebody who owned property in the historic district that would represent those issues, that would be presented to a property owner who may be faced with economic issues, and make sure that those views are presented and considered as we deliberate over, the choices we look for and make. So I just wanted to make sure that we, in our deliberation here, as much as we're also looking at the architectural, the massing, the size, that we also, keep in mind that that's one of our charges that our group needs to keep in the forefront as we go through this discussion. So thank you, Mr. Hatch.
Sure.
In light of Mr. Gertler's revised design, we wanted to make sure that still those statements in the report reflect those sentiments that were in our ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can.
I have one question for John.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So just to get back to my favorite topic, scale and mass. You presented a whole page of scale and mass discussion in your original report, and then in your recent revisions, you spoke to it again, indicating that there had been some adjustments that mitigated the size of the proposed design, but you said, I don't see any additional design changes that would impact this impression of a building at this scale unless the height of the proposed building were reduced. So obviously you've said these things. Just maybe you can summarize quickly your concern, as you've shown it in 2 separate times now, with the bulk of the building.
So I'm really just pointing out that that the new building is larger than the current theater. I am actually not stating that's good or bad. I'm just pointing out that that's the case, and the reason is that the apparent mass of the original theater is reduced because it has a sloped roof. So and the proposed building has, as you've pointed out, has a larger volume because it doesn't have a sloped roof. It has a flat roof.
So you don't see a good or a bad with a building that may be the largest building in the downtown historic district?
It's a large building. As I said earlier in the report, there are other buildings on that street that are large. The railroad station directly across the street is a pretty large building as well. They've done a lot to mitigate the apparent scale.
Okay, so you're not concerned that this building has overwhelmed the street, especially in light of the fact that the street takes a bend and you see even more of the building as it projects.
Actually, it was the bend in which direction?
Post office, the street takes a turn so that looking down the street from Waverly Place, you see quite a bit more of the building, both the post office and the new proposed design. They project considerably out into your view plane because the street takes a little kick and you see those other facades to a much greater degree than if it was a straight street. So to my mind, it has
certainly impacts your apparent, how you perceive it.
Because right now we have a two-story sort of head house that goes back to a taller movie space, but now they're filling it all the way up. So not only is the gable being filled in, but you're filling in the two-story head house all the way up as well.
Well, the two-story part, has become a three-story part, and then it's set back to the four-story.
Only set back 10 feet. The existing head house is 30 feet. So it is certainly a larger building, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Hatch? Other questions from the board regarding this design proposal at this point? Then I think we should move on in the meeting and invite questions from the public about the design issues that were discussed this evening. I will have a timer going. You have 3 minutes. So I would urge you, if there are multiple people asking questions, come up to the podium, sign in so you can use your time wisely, not just signing in and shuffling back and forth. So if there are more people, you can step forward and sign up. But state your name and address for the record, please. Is there a sign-in sheet?
I don't see a sign-in sheet.
I'm so sorry. Here we go. This is what we... Thank you, John.
I can start, though.
Yes.
My name is Shari, S-H-A-R-I. The last name is Guidos, G-U-I-D-O-S, 21 Lathrop Avenue, Madison. I have 2 questions. One is, we're talking about volume and mass. I think this might be a question for you since you did an analysis on it, but...
I did an analysis.
Okay.
I commented.
Okay. That's a mathematical formula. So what is the mass of the current movie theater, and what is the mass of the new structure, and what is the percentage of difference?
I think that's for Mr. Gertler to start with, so please.
Yeah, I think you're referring to volume and not mass, I presume, but...
Fine.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, what the difference in volume is between the two buildings.
Sorry, the difference is?
I don't know the difference between the two.
Okay.
But that would be a cubic foot number, if that would be, is that going to be meaningful to you?
I think so, because in this discussion, I think we're getting distracted by the height, and I think the concern, especially, well, I'll say my concern is how big it is, and it's a mathematical formula that we should understand.
Well, we could look into what the actual numbers are for cubic volume of the buildings.
Okay. My second question is, if two retailers did take that space as a movie theater, it would never have a sloped floor. It could not accommodate a sloped floor for someone coming in to run a movie theater there. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. You wouldn't have a sloped floor in a typical retail store.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there additional questions from the public?
Hi, Jim Malcolm, 24 Maple. I was wondering, since we're spending an awful lot of time on the height, and you're planning on retail space, well, there's still retail space open in Madison and more new retail space going on Central Avenue and so on. Have you considered 4 floors of residential? You can get your 10, 10, 10, 10, stay under 40, stay up to 40 feet, still have your underground parking, get your 24 apartments or more, which coincidentally is the number of affordable housing units I think Madison is on tap for. Oh, has that been considered?
It's not been considered. Traditionally, residential on the ground floor is not a desirable use.
It would require a use variance. So
it would require what?
A use variance. The requirement for the zone that we're located would not allow residential by right on the first floor.
More variances than, I mean, you're not a stranger to variances.
Well, a use variance is a whole different animal than the minor bulk variance that we seek.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, interesting question. Any additional questions? Yes, keep.
Yes, my name is Michelle Cameron. I'm at One Community Place, Madison. My question is considering the amount of traffic and so forth on the street, it was mentioned that there's going to be 24 spaces underground parking. Do you think that that's a realistic amount of parking, one spot per unit?
I would just interject and say that is a question for the planning board, and there are rules about parking and parking spaces and so on. The HPC does not have a charge and really not a familiarity with those calculations. Hold that for when this comes to the planning board. It's a good question, but we are not the right board to answer it. Sorry. Thank you, Michelle.
Good evening. Tom Abruzzo, 52 Maple Avenue. Jeff, I want to go back to a comment you made during your presentation. You said you're recessing the 4th floor of the building to reduce the apparent size of the building. I'm interested in, of all the pictures we get, for instance, the one here, everything seems to be ground floor related pictures. So whether it's from the view from Waverly Place, looking down Lincoln, or from Prospect, whatever, but the true view of this building comes from the gateway to the town, which is the train station, and the view from the platform. People getting off every day. When I get off the train every day commuting in from the city, I walk down the beautiful steps, one side or the other, I walk right down. What do you see? You see the movie theater. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be staring right at the 4th floor there. There's not going to be any change to the view. We're going to be seeing 4 floors. So if you want to make it to look like 3 floors, why don't you just build it to 3 floors? That'd be my first question.
And the question is, why don't we build it to 3 floors?
Yeah.
It's not the program of the building. For economic reasons, we're building a 4-story.
Okay, can we again get some views of designs from how it's going to look from the train station platform?
I believe the view that you've been looking at from across the street is a pretty accurate view of that.
No, it's ground floor. I don't look at that building from the ground floor. We walk down Lincoln, you look at whatever. I don't look at from Waverly and go, oh, look at that beautiful or building movie theater. I look at it, I look down the street. I see the movie theater from the platform on the train station, which is high and elevated, and will be staring right at that fourth floor, almost eye to eye.
Actually, because I take the train every day, and a good part of the train station shields the view of the movie theater. That head house at the train station is directly across the street, which is why I keep on drawing a section through the train station and the movie theater building and our building, because the heights relate. The train station building is higher than our proposed building. So you actually can't see it directly. You can see it in between some columns, but it's really not as you're describing it in your face. It's not that. I've looked at it as well as you have, but I think you need to take another look, and I'm happy to also.
Okay. Well, it's direct from when you come down the stairs. It's right there. Before you start going down the steps, the view right across is right there. And then obviously if you're walking along, you see it pretty clearly. So, my other question, again, if this is not related fairly to this forum, that's fine, but have you all done any studies about who are the sort of the profile, who's going to be the likely tenants to this building? Because I've seen the floor plans. You got 24 units, square footage, most of them I think less than 1,000 feet.
Stop. Sorry.
Okay.
That is your 3 minutes, but finish your question.
Just want to get if there's been any studies about who would be the likely.
There was testimony by a representative of the applicant early on about the retail market that's likely available.
Okay. I just don't see commuters wanting to go on a 1 hour. I guess this is a comment I'll keep for another time, but.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Questions are good. Further questions from the public? Okay.
Hi, Dorothy O'Brien, 38 Crestwood Drive, Madison. This is going back to the question Mr. Kellogg asked Mr. Hatch. Do you have concern, I'd like to rephrase that question, do you have concerns about in the historic district, not the train station or the movie theater, I don't know which of the two is larger, of a large historic building in the historic district being replaced with a larger non-historic building, which would be basically the crown, replacing the crown of what is the historic district?
In my memo, I talked about that the demolition of a historic building in a historic district is the most drastic thing that you can do. It is by its nature a drastic encroachment. Now, there are a lot of other parts of the context of that discussion. This is an empty building, and it's been empty for a bit, and it has structural issues and all of that stuff. But the demolition of a contributing building in a historic district is the most drastic thing that you can do in a historic district. So that's one whole part of the discussion, and to look at that, and there's been lots of testimony about the condition of the building and all of that stuff. The other is, if it does get replaced, what does it get replaced with? And the idea is to have something. I mean, there are both design considerations, and then Mr. Solo brought up there are also economic considerations, and so that's kind of what the whole discussion here is. If I had my druthers about what the building was, in a perfect world, I think it wouldn't have a fourth floor. But but this is what's proposed, so that's kind of what we're looking at.
Okay. And my second question is concerning the view of the building from Main Street, which people have described as not being aesthetic. I, on the other hand, it's barely noticeable really from Main Street. You have to really be looking across the the auto lot that's behind the movie theater to even notice the back of the movie theater. Would it be possible for an artist rendering of what the new building will look like to be submitted? A view of it from, what the view of it will be from Main Street?
Again, I'll repeat what I had said before, and that is the design of the front and back of the building are virtually identical. The program stays the same. So if you look at the view of the back of the present movie theater building, and I think we showed that a little while ago, I think clearly that's not something that anyone wants to look at and say that's the older version.
Yeah, but it shows the quality. So what I'm referring to now is the sheet 1 of 7 on the 4/4/2019 revisions, which are in the record and which have been referred to tonight. One of the depictions is entitled, number 2, is entitled View of Northeast Corner, and that shows a portion of the rear and the quality of finish. So maybe you could show her that.
And I wonder, do we have a picture taken from Nautilus?
Sure.
This is an older version. Yeah, so there's been modifications to windows, et cetera. And the parapet, that's basically the approach to it.
Mr. Grover, can you just speak into the mic and explain to the
Here.
question?
So the rendering that Mr. Wolfson was referring to was dated, I can't read this offhand, but it was the older version of the facade of the building before the changes were made in the last 2 go-arounds. But it shows the quality of the building. It shows it being a brick building. It shows the new windows. It shows the parapets. It shows the setbacks. I think clearly a much nicer building than what you see now is the back of the movie theater building. You're just seeing a white object in the back, and you can see the side of the building is also fully detailed and realized, whereas right now it's a series of stucco on top of brick with exposed piers.
Here.
There's nothing architectural about it.
There's a picture of the existing back, right?
Yeah, the existing back is very neutral right now. It's really not very noticeable in passing.
Can I make a
appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. I want to make a point about, so it is visible from Main Street at this point, but it's visible because it's a vacant lot, and so at some point, presumably, there's a possibility that that is going to get filled in.
But that lot is not part of the development area.
No, but
it's not part of this assemblage, but it is a vacant lot that could be, as Mr. Hatch is pointing out, it could be developed with a building that would block that view.
Yeah, actually, it's not vacant. It's a parking lot. There's an auto body shop. There's the 2 garage doors you see right there.
Right.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Additional questions, please.
Nancy Wallace, 28 Maple Avenue. I just want to ask if the other building where the floor store is, on the other side of the post office, what is the size of that building? Did you do any? I mean, that building. I mean, we can visualize. We see that building, so we know what that looks like, and we know the size of that. We're looking at this rendition. Renditions do absolutely nothing. It's lovely and you did a great job, but you can't get a sense of how massive it is. Now, if you compare that to the building, the floor store, do you have any idea how big that building is?
I don't know the width of the building offhand, but we have image looking down Lincoln Place and comparing the height of that building to the height of the proposed building.
Okay.
And if we could pull that back up again. We have that in two different views, but probably the one looking east would be the most effective. Excuse the time, it's from different presentations we're pulling together.
No, I can see it.
So there's another view in the other direction, and there it is. So I think you can see the white dashes are 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, and then the parapet of the 3 Lincoln Place is 34 feet, which is actually a little bit higher.
So you're saying the white that we're seeing, that's the proposed building? The white building that we're looking at there?
That's correct.
That's the proposed building.
So I think it's important to point out, so the height of 3 Lincoln Place is over here, and what we're comparing is the face.
So the height is the same. I guess it's the width?
Well, the width is different.
Yeah.
I don't know the width of this
Do you
building.
have any idea what the difference? I mean, does anybody have any idea what the difference is in the width? Because that building doesn't look so massive, and it fits there. Where your building just is, we've seen massive in Madison. We're done with massive in Madison.
So he doesn't know the width of the building.
Okay. All right, well.
But it is important to note that the width of the proposed building is no wider than the existing movie theater building.
Okay. It just looks bigger than it.
Well,
I mean,
if you're not comfortable with renderings, then maybe there it is.
no,
but
with all
it
that,
is the same width.
when you see the dotted lines, it's substantially bigger. Looking at it visually.
We please have questions?
Yes. So is there a question further to that?
No, maybe we can do some, or somebody can just because you can see a building, can you find out the width of that other building and how big that is compared, because visually it's so much easier. Then you can compare the one. I mean, that's me.
I think any of us could go to the tax office and look at the width of the property and find that out pretty handily. We just don't know tonight.
Okay.
So we won't speculate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Information. I would.
Thank you.
I'll do that. I did have another question. Now I kind of.
Let's see if somebody else wants a question first, and then we'll come back to you over time. Any other member of the public has a question? Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for this time. A couple questions for Mr. Gertler, please. Mr. Gertler, when did...
Your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is John Morris, Morris, 27 Bedford Court in Madison. I'm also the president of the Madison Chamber of Commerce, and I co-own a business and commercial property at 71 Kings Road in Madison. Mr. Gertler, how long has the former movie theater building been shuttered and vacant and non-performing?
I'm going to have to ask, is it over 2 years now? Over 2 years.
2 years. The applicant's plan for the new building, a couple general questions about that. Conjecture is involved, but based upon current, what we know about planning and things like that in urban environments, I think answers are very much in grasp. First question is, would the applicant's new building increase the amount of foot traffic in downtown Madison?
It would increase the foot traffic, particularly from a boarded-up building today, for sure. Yes.
Would the new building increase economic activity in a general sense in downtown?
Well, the answer is, I believe, yes, and that's the goal of the project.
And would the new building increase the prestige of downtown Madison?
We think it would significantly.
And one other question, if I can. Would the applicant's new building bring more attention to the historic nature and building and fabric of downtown Madison? by bringing in increased viewers or visitors and residents and shoppers to the new retail spaces on Lincoln Place?
Well, we think it would do that also by having increased people looking at the Madison downtown, appreciating what is still viable down there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bob Madera, 12 Wayne Boulevard. M is in Mike, A, D is in Delta, A, R as in Romeo, A. Okay. Mr. Gertler, you mentioned that your movie theater, which will have a flat floor, will have a screen bigger than the one down in excuse me, Hickory Mall. So how big is your screen going to be?
Well, the one at Hickory Mall is, I think, 10 feet high. This could be about 12 feet high. What we're showing, just to understand, we're showing the opportunity is that you would, if there were a theater that were built in that space, that you would enter at the midpoint and you would go up half the aisles and you would go down to the other half, down to the screen. That would be the way you'd approach it.
I'm confused. This is a 12-foot screen, right? You said a 12-foot high in a 15-foot room, but you said earlier that, you don't get 15 feet. You have pipes and things that are taking up space in the ceiling. So actually, how high from the floor would you put the top of the screen? How high could you go? 12 feet? 13 feet?
So we haven't designed a movie theater to its fullest extent, but we've designed a volume to insert a movie theater into it. What we've shown is the ability to put a 12-foot screen. We've shown the ability to put a raked floor going up and down. And until someone proposes to rent the space, not every movie theater operator has the exact same requirements. So therefore, the owner of a building doesn't create a movie theater for one movie theater operator and negate 9 others. You wait for them to come to you and you make the correct accommodation.
Okay, so I understand. So this is only a possibility that there'd be a movie theater. The one that shows up in the designs is simply a possibility. I know you're anxious to say something. What is it?
Yeah, what we've shown is a generically designed movie theater, but Bowtie might want something different.
But you said raked, so I'm just trying to get this, because if you've got a 12-foot screen and you've only got about maybe, 13 foot, 12 foot, 13 foot to work with.
No, you have more than that.
Well, it's a maximum of 15 foot, and you're not going to have 15 foot.
Right. So if you were designing a movie theater...
No, I'm asking about this.
You would not put pipes and ducts where the screen is. You would design around it.
So you would have all 15 foot. Okay, let's say you've got 15 foot. So the bottom of the screen would be 3 foot off the ground. And people are sitting behind one another, and you said raked.
Yes.
How high from the bottom of the rake to the top of the rake?
We go up about 7 feet.
70 feet?
7.
7 feet. Okay. All right. So that's not really steep. Okay? Especially if you have somebody tall. So I'm vertically, I can't say short. I'll say vertically challenged. Okay?
Right.
If I've got somebody 6 foot tall sitting in front of me and there's a very slight angle up, and the bottom of that screen is max 3 foot off the floor, I'm probably never going to come back.
We need specific questions.
Well, that's my question. How can that be a viable movie theater, given the size of the room, the fact that the screen would have to come down to maximum 3 foot off the floor? I mean, I think this is just, I'll be honest, I feel conned with this movie theater concept.
Okay,
that's it.
Thank you.
Is there a response to that? Mr. Gertler, do you want to respond?
Does he want to respond to the comment that he made that he feels
on
like
the
he's
question
being
he's
conned?
talking about, yes, with the issue.
No, I don't think so.
You have no response to that, correct?
To that, no.
Okay, thank you.
How you doing? My name's Eric Range, 17 Bellow Avenue in Madison. Jeff, are you familiar with the urbanomic study from 2016 that was commissioned by the Borough and the Downtown Development Commission? And if so, its recommendations to increase the residential capacity in the downtown core. Do your plans kind of reflect that increase in the desire to have an increase in residential population downtown, and therefore the height of the building and the number of units you've proposed?
It does do that, and it also includes 4 additional COA units, which are needed in Madison.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, next.
I'm Lori Reynolds at 29 Academy Road. Reynolds, R-E-Y-N-O-L-D-S, like the rap. Lori, L-A-U-R-I-E. Yeah, so we've had a lot of discussion about the size and the volume, and I recall, I think that Chris said it was about 30% bigger, the proposal, just to get a sense there. So I had more questions about the use and the contribution to Madison and life in Madison. Were you aware that this site is in the Civic Commercial Historic District?
Yes.
Kind of when you started? And that it was designated as arts and cultural?
As one of the uses, yes.
I think one of the last meetings we said it was the only spot designated as arts and cultural. I'm looking at Janet because she was my teacher. I want to use the right terms. I think it was the only spot in the Civic and Commercial Historic District that was designated for arts and culture.
Yes.
So I'm curious as to the arts and cultural uses that you considered or designed, in terms of performance space or something that would contribute to downtown Madison. Because as Boy Scout parents and churchgoers, we encourage our children to contribute to each other and to the community overall, right? Boy Scouts build seats, and kids sing at nursing homes and so forth. So I'm just wondering what designs did you consider that would contribute to Madison overall before you came to this residential?
Well, there's a 15-foot high floor-to-ceiling in the building, and any group that would want to use that for any use they want to, any arts use or any cultural use, or any auditorium use, or any work use, it's all viable, it's all allowable in there. So if the question is, are we designing it for one use only, the answer is no. We're designing it for a variety of uses.
Okay, because I heard retail and you were going to, rent it to the first person who came for retail. So then I'd like to pick up on what Karen said in terms of anything in the historic district should contribute to the people of Madison so they can thrive, maintain a desirable life, and maintain, a level of activity. So my question is, I want to ask an open-ended question, but what things have you considered, like a food court that would bring in other people from other places that would absolutely increase the foot traffic? Or I know I heard you say earlier that there's a beautiful view from the terrace upstairs. What if that could be opened to the public somehow to bring people into Madison, to increase the foot traffic for the retailers? Did you consider anything like that? Or what things like that have you considered? For instance, a food court where artsy type food people could set up different booths and have a variety of activities going on.
So I think the testimony on numerous occasions has been that...
Wait, let him, if he can answer the question, he should answer it, not
He's an architect. This is a question.
I understand that.
I'm going to refer back to prior testimony by another witness.
He should answer it.
It's appropriate for me to refer back to testimony at a hearing that you weren't in attendance and weren't the attorney of at the point that has already addressed this. It's not an appropriate question posed to our architect. It's a market question.
Well, excuse me, I'm building on what I think Karen Geisy was reading from an Historic Preservation Commission document. Thrive and maintain desirable life and activity. So something that would benefit more than the 18 families that might rent the units on the second and third floor.
A food court would be wonderful. Absolutely. I don't know I'm not sure what else you'd like me to say.
seems like you're excluding that and just talking about retail, just...
Well, the food court is retail, isn't it?
So then, there are 10 variances, so then my other question is, what have you designed that doesn't require 10 variances? Have you been able to design anything within code that would be appropriate for this site?
You indicated earlier that variances weren't the province of this commission.
Yeah, and we're thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
We're double timing there, Laurie. So if you have additional questions, when everyone else has had a chance to ask a question, but I think we've heard some of the answers on that. Is there anyone else?
Yeah. Just one clarification, Lori. That was not from a Historic Preservation Commission document. That was from a report from the applicant, the Tomasetti report. I just wanted the recorder to get that. Thank you.
Hello, Larry Wickman, 33 Walnut Street. A few questions. Main Street traffic versus Lincoln Place traffic, pedestrian and also cars. Which side of the building do you think will be the most seen?
It's a guess, of course, but I think probably traveling west.
Main Street traffic, and people on Main Street will probably see us. This will have more of an impact on Main Street than
I'm sorry, when you said
Lincoln.
which direction, I thought you meant east to west or west to east. What was, can you ask your question again?
Which side of the building will be seen the most? From Main Street, Route 24, by the most people? Main Street, Route 24, or Lincoln Place?
I think Lincoln Place.
Think more people will see this from Lincoln Place than the thoroughfare of our town?
Yes.
Even with its new dominance over the area?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Are you aware that the terraced back of the building is viewable? You can see it from Dodge Field a quarter mile away?
I'm not, but it's not surprising to me.
And it's smaller now of a terrace, of a roof line. You're going to be increasing that roof probably about 30% in the back. The wall will be about a 30% bigger.
So I'm not sure where the 30% is coming from, so it's hard to respond to that number. I don't know where that number came from.
Can you apply a number, like how much bigger is the back wall going to be from moving it from a terrace to a horizontal block?
I really would rather look at the numbers and get back to you on that.
Okay. But currently there is no actual rendering of the building from Main Street as it has been revised?
The rendering that we have is an older rendering, and it's really from almost the Nautilus parking lot area.
Okay. Also, the current terraced back of the building.
You said the current on the present building?
The present building, yes. The terraced on the back of the building. Are there any windows or light sources coming from the back of that building currently?
I don't believe so, no.
And it will be increased in size also now with windows put in place overlooking Main Street?
Yes, it will.
So that would be a significant change of us looking at that area, looking towards the train station?
It will look different. There will be a building that has life in it, yes, looking from that direction.
Okay. We're going to 4 stories high?
That's correct.
And windows, it's a new height, it's a taller building, there'll be windows, there'll be light sources all around the building. How far away will that building be seen from the town portion, not this side of the town, but the other side of the town? How much impact will that have? It'll be a substantially tall building with a lot of light that we don't have now.
I think there will be a very little impact, is my point of view.
Okay. I have one other question about the Saxon portfolio. Can someone answer that? The online portfolio of Saxon properties?
That's not the testimony that is the subject of the cross-examination at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Peter Hinge, 3 Ross Court, Hinge. My concern is the movie theater. I think the building looks fine to me. It will definitely add something positive to the street. but whether it fits the historical picture, I'm not so sure. Has it been considered to use the front of the current movie theater to make that part of the construction?
Well, we have considered that, and the front of the building right now is barely pinned to its substrate behind it. It's actually paling away right now. So to save one width of brick is virtually impossible to do. Also, the lower floor is not at all what the original building was. The second floor is only a brick plane with some punched out windows. So salvaging that conceptually does not seem to be the direction you would want to design an entire building behind it by looking at the second floor of that building.
So it has been considered, in other words,
Yes.
and ruled out.
Yes, that's right.
We see in many places that building projects are preserving the front walls. I don't know how thick they are, but it seems to me that perhaps it could be possible.
Well, if it were a building that I think we all thought was architecturally significant and would really add something to the future uses of the building, that would be one thing. But because it doesn't, and structurally it's compromised so much, there doesn't seem to be a reason to pursue that approach.
Mm-hmm. All right. As far as the movie theater is concerned, I have similar reservations about the 15 feet and the small screen and whatnot. Has anybody who knows about running of movie theaters taken a look at this to see if it's even viable to have a 100-seat movie theater in this kind of space?
Well, I think that we looked at a 91-seat theater, and we thought it was viable.
I'm sorry?
We looked at a 91-seat theater with plush seating.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but has anybody who is knowledgeable in running movie theaters looked at this and said, yes, that can work?
If I may, counsel, again, there was prior testimony from the owner in terms of the work they did trying to consult the market on movies. There was testimony presented that they had no legitimate interest in a movie operator in the current configuration and the amount of money that would be required to put it in usable condition. So the answer is yes, and that's in the record.
I wasn't so much concerned about the current movie theater, but the new space. Did the same people look at the new space and say, yes, this is a good idea, it can work, it's viable?
The owner consulted with knowledgeable people in the movie market as to the proposal for a potential movie theater that's shown.
All right. Thank you.
Just to get a number, because we're getting close to time. It's 10 o'clock now. Any besides the gentleman that's standing right now, is there anyone else that has a question from the public before we go to public comment? Just by a show of hands, just one. Go ahead.
Okay. Can I ask questions to the Tom Harlan Putis, 27 Palmer Room, HARALAMPOUDIS, 27 Pomeroy Road. Okay. So, full disclosure, I was originally a suitor trying to buy the building. I'm actually grateful that I did not get the building when the Saxon Group decided to come in and buy it for development, but I did originally feel it was important to have a theater, and we had discussed that, Jeff, but after talking to the tenants that were there, Bowtie, and looking for other tenants, it was impossible to find any movie company to stay in the current condition that the theater was in. Even if it was renovated, there was no theater companies that wanted to come to it downtown anymore, from the people that I was talking to. But that's not the point of my question. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get disclosure as to who I am, so that you know when I'm talking, nobody comes up and says, oh, he was so-and-so. Okay, sorry about that.
Try to keep it limited to questions.
Yes, sir. Okay. So, well, a question for the board.
It's directed.
Okay, Mr. Gertler, do you believe that
in the history of the central business district, every time a developer came in the last 120 years to change the landscape of Main Street or Lincoln Place, where there was probably single-story or two-story homes that weren't used as businesses, were converted to buildings like British Pine, like the building that I own at 17 Waverly Place, like the YMCA building on Main Street, the James building. Do you think that there was people that came out and objected to the progress and development that was going to take place on Main Street?
Yeah, I certainly was not there 100 years ago or 50 years ago. I know I have gray hair, but I'm not that old. So I don't know if they objected, but what I would have observed was that there's such a variety of architecture in downtown Madison that clearly the people of Madison welcomed new and innovative architecture in different styles. And that's why there's such a diverse, such a diverse amount of architectural styles in downtown Madison.
Sure. So when you were on the planning board, and I was also on a committee back then when we were studying the different height options for downtown, was there ever, and you commented on this before, and Chris was on my committee back then also, was there ever a discussion of whether we should have 3 stories or 4 stories in a 45-foot structure, or are we really focusing on what the effect would be to the height of something that was 60 feet as opposed to 45 feet?
Yeah, I distinctly remember speaking about the number of stories because just picking a number out of the hat, 45 feet or whatever the number is, as a designer, it's only meaningful what you can put within that envelope. So 45 feet has this actual significance in design, whereas 40 feet does not, for example. 35 feet in the residential district of Madison has real significance. We've seen that already. 45 feet in downtown has another significance to it in numbers of stories.
Okay, thank you.
Terrence O'Brien, 38 Crestwood Drive. I was wondering, would you be willing to consider making the 4th floor maybe like sky blue or medium gray? Because maybe if it like blended in with the sky, it would get rid of many of the concerns about the height. If it might make it less noticeable that way.
It is a consideration, but the reality is that most skies are not beautiful blue, and they tend to be a little whiter than blue. So if you look at a lot of additions to buildings that are set back, they often are a much lighter shade to blend in with clouds, white skies, or lighter color skies. So this tends to make the building appear smaller and fade away when you have a lighter tone like this. Blue would probably stand out against most skies.
So you do figure it'll be less noticeable with this shade?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to close the public question portion of this meeting? Yes? We agreed to make a motion? Okay, we have new council, we have new rules. Well, then I'll make a motion that we close the public question portion of this meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And hearing none, we have closed the public meeting. I am now informed that we can have public comment, doesn't have to be a question, related to things that happened tonight. So again, public comment related to design. Council's been very clear. Comment related to other issues, particularly some of the theater issues or economic issues, may not be discussed tonight because we haven't really had expert testimony on that. But if you have something else to put into the record that can't be phrased in a question and would like to put it on the record, now would be a time. So again, come forward, 3 minutes, and state your name, please.
My name is David Hanna. I live at 87 Central Avenue here in Madison. I wanted to thank Mr. Gertler for his presentation. I find him to be very knowledgeable and articulate about these matters, and I've attended all of the meetings. One of the things that has inspired me is the desire to keep the historic district for the town and the sense of civic mindedness and history combining. And I wanted to share some words that I found very inspiring and very articulate that were written by Mr. Gertler in an op-ed to the Eagle just a number of years ago. Some of you may have been familiar with this article. I don't think it could be put any better, frankly, than he put it. He writes, "Over the past few years, it's been distressing to watch the demolition of so many beautiful historic homes and buildings in Madison. It's become all too common to watch the erosion of Madison's history, brick by brick. Our fair city's rich history is slowly evaporating. Are we also not losing our spirit to remember why we so enjoy living here? Madison feels a little less quote-unquote authentic each time another gem becomes just another historical footnote." I can't read the whole thing because I'll run out of time, but I was wondering if it's possible to share copies of this particular op-ed with the Historic Preservation Commission.
That's fine, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciate your comments, David. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, then I will say we will move to adjourn this meeting. We have no more witnesses for this evening, and we are ready to close up for tonight, unless there's an objection to adjourning. Nope. Okay.
Close public comment and motion.
Okay.
Motion to close the public comment. Second.
Second.
Motion to close the meeting.
Well, are we going to just make an announcement again
certainly.
for context that this is going to continue on the 28th?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and the purpose, the way we envisioned it in our conversation with the council, was that Save the Theater's attorney would be present, would have an opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Gertler, and then would present whatever witnesses they have to present.
Yes, that's correct. That was as per my statement at the beginning of the meeting.
Right.
Yes.
And so also just in terms of housekeeping, I believe Mr. Testa has asked for a disclosure of the witness or witnesses that will be appearing, and I don't know that we've received that complete information yet, that she's on vacation.
I have not received that yet, correct.
Right. We also had asked for a disclosure in terms of the constituency of her client, which is anticipated under the municipal land use law and other municipal law. We have not received that. We renew our request for that. I think that's it. So thanks again for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
You have these, you have mine.